and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm Marcia Teal, and I'm so glad that you could join us today. Today's show is going to be about staying above the fray, staying positive, relaxed, and resolving conflict with ease. Tall order, especially these days with COVID-19 and everybody staying at home and things are bad out there, markets are down, a lot going on. This is a big topic because it's affecting everyone. Even if you have not been subjected to the coronavirus or know someone who has, it's very stressful. And stress can cause a lot of problems. Well, my guest today can handle all that and more because she is an expert for almost 20 years, and her job includes teaching people, companies, and people from nations around the world communication techniques, negotiation skills, conflict resolution, and even in the United Nations. She has gone to various countries, including Europe and Africa and Afghanistan, and she teaches skills so that these different people in different countries can learn how to resolve conflict better. And that's so needed. There's conflict everywhere in the world at some point. There always has, and hopefully there will not be forever, but until that time comes, we all need to learn how to resolve these issues. So joining me today from her home office in Key West, Florida, is Elisa Levy. Hi, Elisa.
Hi.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me and for the work that you do and the caregivers listening to this.
Well, you have an amazing portfolio of trips and tips and techniques and things that you have been doing for the last 20 years, which makes you an expert on this topic. You know, conflict is something that probably nobody really likes to have, but we also know that stress can add to conflict. And the more stress, it can just add more and more and more until somebody just blows up, blurts out something. And now that everyone is staying home with the coronavirus, they can't get out, they can't release a lot of that anxiety or that nervous energy because a lot of parts of the country still are closed, the parks are closed, a lot of the beaches are closed. People are going to start having conflicts not only with their loved ones, family members, maybe neighbors, but even healthcare workers working on the front lines, working in the field because it's so stressful. So tell us, what are some of the best ways that we can learn how to handle some of this conflict?
Well, I think the first point you already made, which is to know that it's probably going to happen. We're all in a heightened state of anxiety right now. I think we feel to a certain extent, without even realizing it sometimes, that fight or flight feeling. And all you have to do is turn on the news and it can rile you up. And then someone busts into your room when you're trying to get some space and you bark at them. For caregivers, that's got to be even more intense. We're worried. They have real and understandable worries about the health of their patients. They may be short-staffed for obvious reasons, and they have to contend with their own home lives. So we're all on high alert. Caregivers are in high demand. And knowing that you are there is the first step. Now, there's also the whole idea of prevention. I mean, why do we take vitamins? We take vitamins not after we get sick. We take vitamins so that we won't get sick. And the same is true with our emotional immunity. So now more than ever, we all need to be doing some things each day that help us take our stress levels down. And it's easy not to do that because we're watching the news and we're stress eating and I can't start meditating now. But I've been saying to all of my clients, now more than ever, you need to work with your thoughts. Now more than ever, you need to have a morning ritual. It's first thing when you wake up, to start your day off and practice that regularly so that we can bring our stress level down. And just to give you a couple of examples of some things that work and they're easy, okay? For a morning ritual, we hear it all the time, but gratitude notes. You write 3 things down that you're grateful for. We have a jar on my kitchen table. And I just, we sit down, we throw a Post-it note of something we're grateful for, and I make everybody do it. And when I've not been feeling so great, you know what I do? I open that jar, I throw them out on the table, and I pick up a few things. And I remember that I am blessed. Yes, this is a hard time. Yes, we do know people who've been ill. Yes, I'm worried about money just like everybody else, but there are so many blessings. And when I read those, I feel better. So that's one example of a simple morning ritual that you can do. Another, and we know it, we just don't do it, exercise. 30 minutes of getting your heart rate up, walking, skipping rope in your backyard, squats, anything to get your heart rate up and release some of those endorphins is extremely useful. And the third thing that I've been doing more of lately is journaling. So listen, we're encapsulated with these people in our homes, and who are we going to take it out on? Them. So what I've done is something called a free write. I used to teach anger management to men who abused women years ago, and I would have them do something called a free write. And a free write, if you don't know what it is you take a piece of paper and you sit down and you just start writing. There's no logic. It's not a journal entry. It's not how am I feeling today. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to be clearly written. You can get stuck on a word like apple. You keep writing until something else comes. And how do you know when you're done with a free write? When you've got nothing else to say. And then you feel like this tremendous release. And please don't reread it. Don't go give it to the person. Here, I wrote you a little something, right? It's to rip up. It's just an expulsion of getting your emotions out so that you're not taking them out on other people. So I always did these things, but I'm doing more of them. The gratitude piece, number 1. Number 2, every day I'm exercising in the morning to get that energy out and my head clear. And the third thing is that when I'm feeling it, a free write. So that I don't bark at my husband. And by the way, I want to tell you one thing about the free write. When I used to do it, and when I would teach anger management, the men would say, I'm not doing this. This is stupid, but they had to do it because they were in my class. And I cannot remember a single time I taught a class where I didn't have at least one of them come up to me after the free write, the third or fourth, and say, that was great. Thank you so much. I use it all the time. So it's are a release, but also they help us get into a space where we're not hurting the people we love and are living with or taking care of.
That's all great, but what if we're not the aggressor? What if we are on the other side and we have a loved one or a neighbor or someone who we feel they're attacking us? How can we or what can we do to resolve that conflict right then and there without, actually resorting to verbal abuse or physical abuse?
What a great question. So let me distinguish between two answers to that question. If it's physical, I mean, we are seeing a rise in domestic violence. And in that case, there is no alternative. There's no discussing that can be done to prevent domestic violence, and we know that. So in that case, the key is a safety plan to get out, knowing who the resources are in your community, having your car packed and ready to go, just like you would in a normal domestic violence situation. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is an excellent resource. And Florida has its own chapter, and you can get online and look for warning signs, which everybody should know, and safety planning and resources in your community, all of which are staying open. I actually had a friend call the other night and say a friend of mine is experiencing domestic violence, and what should I tell her to do? And, it was like, there's a slew of information. I sent her phone numbers. They're all out there. The state attorney's office is working. People still have access to shelter if they need it, and they should know that. That's if your physical safety is in danger or jeopardized, right? If it's more your emotional, safety, your neighbors yelling at you, and your husband or your wife or your child is snapping at you. And I think we all have been experiencing that. This is a tremendous opportunity to practice the art of forgiveness and understand that we are all doing it. I would say this, let me tell you this. My daughter goes to a Montessori school. She's 9. But when she was 3, she came home and taught me a great lesson. And this is what I want people to use in the COVID crisis right now when they think they're going to have a conflict. She came home one day and she asked for a cookie or something. And I said, no, you can't have a cookie. And she started to she's going to explode. You know how a 3-year-old's about to have a temper tantrum and you can see it coming, and you actually want to take cover under your bed, right? There's no stopping it. And I watch and I'm like, oh no, this is what I'm thinking. And she looked at me and she said, I need space. And she waddled off to her room and sat in a beanbag. and I'm like, what just happened? And started breathing. Okay, not kidding you. 3. She was 3 or 4. So I'm like, I don't know what just happened. What is this I need space thing, right? So I go to her teacher the next day at her little school. I know I didn't teach her that. And I said, what? I told her the story. And I said, she said she needed space, and she calmed herself down, and she removed herself and started breathing on her little beanbag. And the teacher, oh yes, that's what we do here at Montessori. We teach the children the signals in their body when they're about to lose their temper. And then we teach them to say, I need space, and physically remove themselves. And I was like, all these years, I was in my late 30s at that. No, I was in my early 40s at that point. And I thought, how come and I teach conflict resolution. I have a master's degree from Columbia. Nobody ever taught me I need space. And you know what? Ever since then, we say that in my house. When I know when I'm about to lose it, I feel, or when my husband starts to lose it with me, right? Rarely, he's got a great temperament, but rarely. And I'll say, you know what? I think we need some space. And it's almost like the code word in our family, and we will remove ourselves so that it doesn't escalate. And I want to suggest that when someone starts coming at you, that actually we have these conversations. I'm going to get some space, and I'm going to go into this room, or I'm going to go for a walk outside. We can all do that right now. And get the space, because we just need it. We are practicing 0 alone time right now. And there isn't a human being in the world who doesn't need it. Okay. Then, of course, there's the whole idea of we got to sit down and talk it out. And
we're going to
teach a 3-step. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I want to go to that as soon as we go to break, because I love the tip of the space. We have to give some space now to our national sponsor and do a little commercial, but we'll be right back. More wonderful tips from Elisa Levy, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live. It's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe, and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
My guest today is Elisa Levy, and she is an author, a speaker, a trainer, and she teaches people how to do conflict resolution, which is one of her fortes. And so before the break, Elisa, I love that I need space. You know, if people can just be disciplined enough to say, I need space and step away. But you did mention that you have a 3-step plan on how to manage conflict. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is actually not mine, so I don't want to take credit for it. This comes from a book that is really a must-read on conflict resolution. It's called Getting to Yes, and it's written by the Harvard Negotiation Institute's leader and founder, Roger Fisher. And he talks about conflict from the Israeli-Palestinian issues to conflict in your home. And really, actually, the steps in so many ways are quite similar. When I've gone overseas and dealt with conflict in Iraq, it's not that dissimilar from dealing with business conflict and conflict in my own life with my family. So the principles are quite similar. And basically, I filter his book into 3 steps that I teach and I use all the time. And the name of the technique is a little misleading. It's called the lie technique, which doesn't mean that's what you should do. But here's how it works. It's so simple to understand. It's just that it's hard to do. I mean, I've been practicing it my whole adult life and I still find it really hard. But believe me, it works. So the LIE, the lie technique, is an acronym. And the first thing you want to do when you're having a struggle with someone, let's say you notice that you've been fighting with your spouse a lot in this crisis. Or as a caregiver, you notice that you're fighting with your boss, that you feel like too many demands are being placed on you and everyone's getting edgy, or a coworker, and you decide finally, you know what? I don't want to live with this low-grade infection. Like, I want to deal with it. The first thing you do is you sit down and what do you think the L is for? You listen. It sounds so easy, but here's the thing. Most of us, when we walk into a conflict, we get it off our chest. We say, listen, here's my problem with you, and let me tell you all about it. And I can tell you right now, that is the number one mistake you can make because other people's defenses go up, right? And you know the whole Stephen Covey thing, right? Seek first to understand and then be understood. When I learned this technique, I was in graduate school, and I always remember the professor said, okay, when you're resolving a conflict, what percentage of the negotiation do you think you're listening? And we were all like 50%. That's only fair. I listen for 50% and then I talk for 50%. And he was like, it's more like 90. Because the whole point when you're trying to negotiate a conflict is to A, really understand what that person is thinking and feeling, and you can't until you listen to them, and B, to make them feel that you understand. They cannot hear you until you do it. So I always start with an open-ended question. So let's give an example, or actually, why don't you give me an example? Why don't you give me an example of when you think your listeners would come up very typically for your listeners, and then I'll walk you through how you would do it.
Oh, it could be a family that are maybe staying in place with the COVID-19 virus and they're having a conflict about how something should be done. Maybe they're taking care of dad who has dementia and you have a son and you have his mother, the wife, and maybe he's trying to tell her she's not doing something right, and they're starting an argument about the best way to do whatever it is they're doing to help dad.
So let's say I'm the caregiver, because those are the ones tuning in here, and I go into the home and they are giving me a hard time, okay, about this. They're fighting with each other and they're giving me a hard time, and and they're not taking my advice, okay. And I want them to take my advice, that I know what they can do to help their mother, but they're not listening to me. So there's the conflict. So I'm going to sit down with them, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and they're annoyed at me because they think I'm trying to boss them around and tell them how to take care of their loved one. And I'm going to say, tell me how you see this. Tell me what you think the issues are. Tell me what you need from me. And I'm asking all these open-ended questions. And they start saying, you know, Elisa, you aren't giving us the right advice. You're taking over the situation. We know our mother. And I'm dying to interrupt them and tell them, listen, I've been doing this for 15 years and and I do not. Instead, every time you want to defend yourself, you come up with another question. And that's the thing I'll say to myself when I'm in it. I'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe they just said that. But I'll say, ask another question. You know what I say sometimes? Like, if someone says, you know, you're being ridiculous, Elisa, I'll say, what do you mean? Can you give me an example? What do you mean by that? And the whole time I'm trying to ask myself while they're talking, if I were in their shoes, how would I be feeling right now? I want to empathize with them, because the minute that I can empathize, even if I don't think they're right objectively, is the minute I can understand how they feel, the anger goes away, the solutions become possible. So I'm listening, I'm asking for examples, I'm trying to understand this family who's angry with me as a caregiver, and how do I know when they're done talking? I know that they're done when they do one of two things. Either they stop, or they start repeating the same thing over. And that's when I go to I. So that was the L for listen, and then I go to the I. The I is for inform. It's when I get to say my point of view. Now, let me just tell you something. When you know you're going to have a conversation on conflict, prepare in your head your I before you get there, because they're not going to listen to you as long as you listen to them. They don't know this technique. You have the advantage. So if you start waffling, they aren't going to keep you for very long, right? So I might say, look, here's my frustration. I feel like you guys are not listening to my advice. And I know there are a few things that work with your mother because she's been in my care before at our institution. And I just want to share them. And there's 2 or 3 things I want to share with you. If they interrupt me, do I let them? I do not. I say, listen, please, I felt like I heard you. Please let me finish. Let me get to the 2 things I really think your mom needs. And then I share with them my side. Then we go back and forth. Listen, inform. I let them respond, and so on. So all the time I'm asking them questions and trying not to get defensive. When I feel that the issues are out on the table, LI is done. And that's when you get to the easy part. The easy part is E. That's the E in the lie, and it means elicit an agreement. Don't bother, please remember this. I say this all the time to people. Don't bother resolving a conflict if you don't have a plan for action. Getting your feelings out on the table, oh, I'm glad you told me how you feel, and I told you how I feel, is useless if you don't ask one important question. And here's the question I want you to tattoo on your forehead, in your brain, which is always end the conflict, like the discussion, by saying this: what are we going to do about it? Like, what can we do about it? And not what can you do about it, because that implies that you have to do all the work. And not what can I do about it, because that implies that I have to do all the work. What can we do about it? And you walk out with very specific, even if it's one thing, very specific things that you commit to moving forward. And that, all of it sounds so simple, right? But you get into it and you don't listen. You get into it and you never come up with an agreement. So again, the L is for listening, the I is for inform, and the E is for eliciting an agreement. And the more you practice it, the better you get. It's like everything in life.
Well, that does sound simple, but obviously it's going to be new to a lot of people. I knew someone that would never listen to what maybe was being said because they were thinking in their head what they were going to say back without listening. And so the L is obviously so important, because without the listening, you don't know where the other person is coming from. So it is something I think that is worthwhile doing, obviously, but it takes practice. And if people would just start simple and just listen. And I think one of the things that people try to do is they try to do the interjection, they try to be defensive, they try to get on the offensive or attack. And I think that that's hard. It's human nature to try to defend ourselves when we're being attacked. So I love that you have this simple 3-step technique, LIE. We don't want to lie to ourselves and think that we can do it all our own. So there we go. We used it for something that we can remember.
I want to tell you one thing that helps with the listening, and it's called the red balloon. Have you ever heard of it? A lot of people have heard of it, the red balloon.
So maybe a long time ago.
Okay, so the red balloon helps me a lot. The red balloon is this. When someone is telling you their side of the story and you're dying to interrupt them, and I use this with my husband a lot, you imagine that there's a red balloon full of hot air right next to their head. And when can you talk? When it's empty. Right? Because if you start talking, that red balloon just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to pop. So I will literally look at my husband's head. Occasionally he'll get into it and he'll start talking, and I know I interrupt. And I'll look at his head and I'll see a red balloon there, and I'll ask myself, is it empty? Elisa, zip it. You cannot talk until that red balloon is empty, until they're calm. And then you can talk. So that's one of the little sort of mental visual techniques that you can use to stop yourself from interrupting someone when you're in a conflict.
Very, very good. I love it. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we come back more from Elisa Levy. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care, and they have about 50 communities all across the United States, 10 of which are right here in Florida. Arden Courts is a great resource, and they'd like to offer to you, just for watching, this book. It's called The 36-Hour Day. It's an excellent resource for caregivers, especially for caregivers dealing with the trials and tribulations of Alzheimer's disease and other related dementia. If you don't have this book, I strongly recommend that you email Arden Courts today and request it. It's absolutely free. The email address is delray@arden-courts.com. delray@arden-courts.com. Tell them that you heard about the free offer on the Caregiver Solution Info Show, and you can send them your name, address, and telephone number, and they'll be sure to get a book mailed out to you right away. So don't delay. You'll be really glad that you did. So my guest today is Elisa Levy. She is an author, and she is a speaker and a trainer, and she specializes in conflict resolution, which Lord knows we can all benefit from that everywhere we go. We see conflict, and I appreciate you being here with us today, Elisa, sharing your expertise. So we've talked about a morning routine to keep us peaceful, to sort of get us in the flow, a positive mindset. We've talked about conflict resolution, how we can listen better and use the LIE technique, the LIE technique that you explained so well. And now for the rest of the show, I'd like to talk about something else that you're really good at explaining, and that is how to relax. Because caregivers hear all the time from people, just relax. You need to relax. But that's hard to do. First of all, what does that mean? Because relaxation can mean different things to different people. And now that we're all staying at home, sheltering in place, and maybe our relaxation was always walking on the beach when the beaches are closed, or going to the park and the parks are closed, or going to, the movies, or whatever it might be, that we can't do right now until our country is safer, we can all be together more. So we need to relax. So we can't do what we usually do. Plus, caregivers are so stressed out and so busy, they'll say, I don't have time to relax. I can't do yoga. I don't have time to sit for an hour and meditate. And I just don't have time to go for a long walk because I have to be home to take care of my loved one. I can't leave him. He has dementia. He'll set the house on fire, So we'd like to talk about some things that everyone can do. Caregivers, people on the front lines, healthcare workers, anybody who's feeling the stress, not only of the COVID-19, but also of just day-to-day living, and talk about some easy things that people can do that will help them relax that you say they can do in less than a minute. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Okay, so I think we're all in that boat sometimes where we feel like, yeah, if I were retired, I'd meditate, I would go do yoga, I would exercise more. But we don't have that luxury, and it doesn't mean that we can't relax. And certainly we all know we need to do it. So I want you to understand that there's two ways to relax. You can relax your body and your mind will follow, or you can relax your mind and your body will follow. And it really depends on what interests you more, and some people are more physical, so they find it easier to relax their body, and others of us are more mental, and so we find it easier to relax the mind. I actually think playing with both of them is really useful. So let me start with a couple of physical things, and then I'll give you a couple of mental things, all of which you could do in 60 seconds or less. Okay. So for the physical, there's an autogenic release in your body that you can do very, very easily. And actually, all you have to do, and whoever's listening to this, and Marcia, you can do it right now, is set your arms straight down in front of you. I'll just show you with your arms. And close your fist really, really tight in a tight ball, as tight as you can, and imagine sending all your energy and all your tension and all your negativity down to your fist, and squeeze tighter, 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 until it actually hurts to squeeze your fists. And hold it there for about 10 seconds, let's say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then release. Unfurl your fingers, shake your wrists out, actually, and you can feel a little bit of the tingling in your hands if you've done it long enough, right? Okay, that's autogenic. So basically what you do is you go through your body. I could sit down in a chair for 2 seconds in the middle of running around and taking care of a patient. And I could do my fists, my feet. You literally clench your toes, okay? You suck in your stomach, and you take your shoulders and you push them up to your ears, and you hold until you're shaking and shaking and shaking, and then you release your shoulders. So you do that through your hands, your feet, your shoulders, your abs, and you actually feel this. It's a forced release of your muscles. Okay, that's literally 10 seconds. Some people are like, I don't want to do that. That's okay. Here's another physical thing that works. And we totally underestimate this, is the power of our senses, like the smell and taste. So I walk around with me, and I learned to do this years ago, and I travel to Iraq and Kosovo and places like this with just a bottle of lavender and citrus. And what do? They evoke feelings, emotional feelings in you, senses do. That's why when you are walking on a freshly cut lawn, it makes you feel happy because it reminds you of your childhood, right? That's why the beach, when you smell the beach, suddenly it evokes an emotion. We don't realize the power of olfactory has over our physical being. So two things that help. One calms us and one energizes us. The one that calms us best is lavender. So I'll walk around with it. I'll actually just put some in my hand and cup it over my mouth and take a deep breath. And I get that feeling of, that feeling I had as a child when it was dusk and I was playing in the lawn with my friends, right? It's not the same smell, but it's the same feeling. It calms you down, literally calms you down. And then the citrus or the mint, either or, energizes you. So in the middle of the day, if I'm feeling downtrodden and exhausted, I'll just put a little bit in my hands, cup it over my nose, and take a deep breath in, and that's instant. I mean, and this is less than 60 seconds. That's 20 seconds. That's 10 seconds, okay? So the autogenic training for physical and the olfactory, any kind of lavender, mint, I have a closet full of oils. The mental side of things, I mean, we could talk about this for much longer, so I'm just giving you a few. But the mental side of this is just 60-second or less meditations. This is from a book years ago that I read called The Meditation Express. And it was 60-second meditations. Some of the ones that I have are from that. Some of the ones I've learned myself over the years. And Marcia, from being in the class, that I have a few of those. Let me just share with you the one I like the most, okay? And this I learned not from that book, but from a hypnotherapist probably 25 years ago. And what you do is you close your eyes and you imagine yourself walking down like this beautiful lake path, and the sunlight streaming through the trees and the air is brushing against your skin and it feels perfect. And you're all alone on this path, but you're carrying a very, very, very heavy backpack imagine there's pots and pans and things sticking out and tennis rackets and hockey sticks and bedding and food you don't need. And as you walk down the path, you slowly take one thing off of your pack and you leave it by the wayside. And then you walk a few more steps and you take the next thing off your pack and you leave that by the wayside. None of these are things that you need. You have everything you need waiting for you. And so slowly, one step at a time, you take everything out until that pack is so light. And you arrive at the most beautiful, simple little table waiting for you with flour on the table and a perfectly healthy, beautiful meal. And you sit down there and you take that backpack off and you breathe in the good air and you're about to nourish yourself. Just as you sit down in that chair, you can open your eyes and feel the lightness. And I actually use that. I use it so often, I can't even tell you. Pretty much every time I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I'll even do it sometimes like while I'm driving. Just imagine, here I am walking down this path, or, anywhere, my kid's getting on my nerves. I'm walking down that path, taking things off my back, off my shoulders. And so that's one of my all-time favorites. The other one for caregivers. Oh, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I have a question about that one, and I can see how that might work for a lot of people, but what about somebody like me that doesn't like to throw things away? I like to keep things, and for mentally throwing things away, I'd be looking behind me, I really need that tennis racket, and I better go back and get that can of beans because I might need it someday. So that would be a little harder for me to do, to throw things out.
Don't use that one then. Don't use that one. Let me give you another one, because you don't need to deal with that issue, right? This is all to help you relax in 60 seconds or less. There's 8 of them that I've given you, but
good.
Another one that I really like to use is called the bubble, and it's not even a visualization technique, but I used it a lot. I've used it a lot I told you that I, used to work in the field of domestic violence, and people would, and it's probably the same for caregivers, people would come to me and I would deal with compassion fatigue. I would get really upset. They would be crying hysterically, especially when I first started in the field. And I went to my boss and I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And she said, don't you know what the bubble is? I said, no, I don't. Can you know what the bubble? She said, when someone comes to you and they're really upset, and you're taking it on. Imagine that there's a bubble, like take a like cellophane from your feet all the way around you, and imagine that there's a bubble around you that protects you, and you can see through it, and you can hear, and you can even feel compassion, but it can't actually get to you. Their pain can't actually penetrate that bubble. And when someone comes to me now in my work, they come to me all the time, and they're upset and they're crying, and I know I'm going to take it on. I just immediately put on the bubble, and it helps me maintain some emotional distance. And in that sense, I can actually be more helpful. Because if I start getting too involved, then I lack the ability to help. So
Yeah,
that
absolutely makes sense.
So yeah, and that.
I'm sorry, I actually saw someone wrap themselves in a bubble at one of these fun houses, and they had gigantic bubble machine that you can dip in, and it literally covered the whole person from the top of their head till their feet. And to visually see that when you were talking about it, you can put yourself in a bubble, literally and figuratively.
My clients come to me all the time and they're like, I had the bubble. I used the red balloon and I had the bubble. You know, I'm like, good. And just to your point about, you know, you don't like to let things go, so that might not be good for the path. A similar one is walking down a staircase where you imagine yourself at the top of the staircase and you're walking down, and with each step you feel calmer and calmer, and you actually count like 10, 9, 8, and when you get to 1, you're at the bottom of the staircase in the absolute most beautiful place that you know of. And for some of us, that's the beach. For some of us, it's a place we went when we were, you know, children, like a room in our grandmother's house or something like that, that felt really safe and secure. And when you get to 1, you just walk into that place and you stay there and you take 3 deep breaths in that place, but you really try to feel the physical elements of it. Like, what is the skin? What does my skin feel right now? What am I seeing? What colors am I seeing? So you can focus on it. And then you come back up the stairs, you count back up to 10, 1, 2, 3. And when you're at the staircase, you take a deep breath, you come through the door, and you get back into your life. And again, that's less than 60 seconds. So whether it's walking down the path or walking down the stairway, either of those can be really useful. And people will say to me, that's not going to work. And you know what I say? Can't hurt, could help. Why don't you try it 3 or 4 times? And the more that you do it, they say it takes 21 days to make a habit. So I always tell people, try it 6 or 7 times. If you don't feel that you're doing it better after the 7th time, fine. But what if you get to lose 7 minutes? Really? That's nothing. And it absolutely helps. So
that's really awesome. I'm going to try that one. I like that. You can do a little virtual visit to anywhere that you want to go in our mind. We can't leave our homes, but we can virtually visit in our minds, calm ourselves, going somewhere that we enjoy. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more tips from Elisa Levy when we return.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Today we're talking about staying above the fray, staying calm, staying peaceful, how to handle conflict during this terrible coronavirus pandemic. And my guest today is expert at teaching us all of these things. Her name is Elisa Levy, and she is calling in today from her home office in Key West, Florida. And she has 20 years experience with all of these issues and more. So, Elisa, we're talking about relaxation techniques now. And so before the end of our program, I'd like to throw a few more out to you to explain, because I think that caregivers really do need quick, short, easy relaxation techniques that they can do pretty much anytime, anywhere. So one of them that you call the rose petals, or that was in the book that you were talking about, rose petals. Explain about the rose petals.
Okay, so that's more when you have a question like, do I want to keep doing this work? Or what should I do about this relationship, whether it's work or personal? And you can't decide, and you're going over it in your head, and you're staying up late at night. We've all been there. And you just imagine that there's this flower in front of you. It could be a rose or any flower. And it's almost like you did when you were a kid. He loves me now. But you know what I believe is that in our heart of hearts, if we were to take away all of the deliberation that we do know the answer. We always have the answer. No one has it for us. So you close your eyes, you picture the question, and then you're plucking away the rose petals one by one. And at the very last one, you've got your answer. And it's great to pose the question as to something like, should I or shouldn't I? Or what should I do, in one word or less, so that it's not some long, the last petal should just have it like straight and clear. And that's a great way to sort of get to your gut. I used to say to my one of my clients, coaching clients, listen, you have to go to your gut. And he'd say, I can't hear my gut. I'd say, yeah, because it's clouded by your thoughts and your fears. But if we get to the place of faith that we ourselves have that answer, it will always be waiting for you. And so the rose petalist scenario is just a quick way of accessing that. The other thing I like to tell people is when you first wake up in the morning, we are most clear-minded. And so if something's been bothering you and you don't know what to do, should I stay in this job? Should I do that? Is that you ask yourself when you first wake up, what is it that I want out of this? What should I do here? And whatever answer arises is very often the answer that your heart wants. So that's not so much a relaxation technique. Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes it's hard for people to make those kinds of decisions. Caregivers go through decision-making problems all the time. You know, do I keep my loved one home? Do I put them in a memory care? Do I, send them up to my son to take care of? A lot of decisions, and it's very difficult for them. And I think sometimes it's hard for them to match up what's in their head and what's in their heart, and trying to get them both in line, because the head says one thing, the heart says another. So you're saying don't look in your head or your heart, go to your gut, because that is the essence of who we are, right?
Say it, actually. I don't think I could have said that better. In the end, we don't want to always listen to one or the other. Sometimes in a case of care for a family member, the head should overrule, right? But we never want to ignore the heart. And so you're looking for a third option which combines the two. And I think that we know the answers, but we just don't sometimes want to hear them. So the rose petal has been useful to me and also my clients over the years, very much so.
What about the breathing technique, the breathe it out? What about that one?
Okay, so the breathing it out technique, and I actually use a lot of breathing techniques. In these years, I've come to do a different breathing technique, which is called, if anyone's ever done yoga, it's called pranayama, which is a balancing breath. But the breathing out is just a simple idea, is that you inhale a word you want and you exhale a word you don't want. So for example, you might inhale calm or inhale peace, and exhale stress or frustration. So you do it 3 to 5 times. So you inhale through your nose and you would inhale, let's say peace. So you take a deep, deep inhalation, you hold and then you breathe out through your nose, not through your mouth, through your nose, stress, right, to the same count. So if you breathe in for 3, you hold for a second or 2, and then you breathe out for 3, all through your nose, right? So you're not actually losing your breath. I like that technique, and I just want to explain one thing, that pranayama breathing is very similar to that, but you actually use your fingers to close your nostrils. And so you take your thumb and you close your right nostril with it, and you breathe in through your left nostril. Same thing, breathe in, peace. And then you take your pinky and you close your left nostril and you breathe out your right, and you exhale stress. What does that do? It literally helps balance the brain. So you're just holding your nostril in and breathing, inhaling, closing it, exhaling through the alternative nostril while you're saying those words. It's just a variation on what I just explained. And I find the pranayama breathing with the words to be so incredibly helpful. I actually just did it this afternoon after lunch. And even like 3 or 4 breaths of that is extremely useful.
What I think is wonderful, all of these techniques for relaxation, they're holistic and they don't cost money and they're easy to do, and people can do them as much as they need to, and they don't have to worry about popping pills or taking medication if they feel this anxiety, they need to relax, so they can do it as much as they feel that they need to, correct?
Correct. And I have to say this, like, sometimes I'll do it and I don't feel that much better, so I'll try something else. Like, it only takes 60 seconds. So let's say, for example, I did the walking down the path thing and I was like, I don't feel better. I might pull out my lavender, and take a whiff of the lavender, and then I might do a little of the pranayama breathing an hour later. It's not that, it didn't work, so I'm not going to feel any better. We have to keep trying. There isn't anything more important than feeling good. Look, even if you go back to the whole idea of conflict resolution, right action comes from right thought. So I could fake it. I could teach you how to be nice in a conflict. But if your heart isn't there, and if you don't feel the compassion, it doesn't matter. We have to work on ourselves first and feeling calm and joyful in life. And the rest, I promise you, will follow. Years ago, I stopped asking myself, what should I say in the situation? Because it didn't matter what I said. The real question is, what should I think? How should I feel right now? How can I engage in what this other person's saying? And the action would flow from that compassion, not from the right thing to do, right? The right thing to do is after the fact. So we must first and foremost begin working with our minds, right? We have 20,000 thoughts a day, and we need to work with them.
Well, thank you for that. And I think the right thing to do now before we end our show is to let everybody know how they can learn more about you. Do you have a website that they can check out?
I do. It's elisalevy.com. It's my name. And I have lots of information there, and my books are on there and all that good stuff.
Okay, it's Elisa, E-L-I-S-A, Levy, L-E-V-Y. So elisalevy.com. Thank you, Elisa, for being here today. It's been a pleasure having you, talking with you, and learning from you. And stay well and stay relaxed.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you and other caregivers are doing.
Well, thank you, all of you, for tuning in today to the program. I hope that you all are staying safe and sane, and that you can get back to doing what you want to do as soon as possible, and stay well. And call in or write in or email for your free book, The 36-Hour Day. Get that. You have something to read while you're staying at home. And that's easy to do at delray@ardendashports.com, or you can call in at 888-478-2410. Until next week, we'll see you. Give yourself a virtual hug. I'm giving hugs over the internet here, Elisa, so there's one for you. And,
thank you.
And y'all stay safe and take care, and thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week.